condition for a phase-specific landscape and environmental management plan, and that must be informed by the ecological mitigation strategy that is submitted, and that specifically refers to swifts and house sparrows and other birds.
I think they read your mind, Susie. Okay. Any other conditions, points, clarifications, questions, concerns? Tom.
Sorry, question that could lead to a condition, possibly. Is it possible to ask the applicant what their intentions are about development in and around the time of the championships during the sort of development phase? Just mindful of whether, given there is already a lot of disruption happens around the championships, would additional disruption be happening around that time with the development?
There's a question on the construction management plan around that period. Let's just double check if Callum's not already talked about that.
I'm happy to defer to the applicant, but what I would say first quickly is that there is a temporary overlay condition attached to this planning permission, and that what that does is it allows securing all the temporary infrastructure that would go in place for the championships and qualifying events. So that would be the mechanism by which some of the temporary infrastructure would be secured through the council and approved.
John?
I think just to echo that, it would be captured in that, but typically there's no construction around the championships for the obvious reasons. But if it was exceptionally had to happen, then it would be dealt with in the construction management plan, but there's no intent to do that.
And the resident group would be engaged as part of it. Nods. Cool. All right. So if there's no other conditions, do one more, and then I've got my 106 again.
Sorry about this. I was just thinking about the the fence and the hedge and hedgehogs. Don't all laugh. I just wondered if there's going to be a long barrier. I don't know whether it will be a barrier. It depends on the fence. If it's not a barrier, fine. If it is a barrier, can we be looking at some hedgehog tunnels on the way?
Fair question. I would assume that it wrapped up in the same mechanisms as Swifts, but Callum, tell me otherwise.
I defer to the applicant as to whether hedgehogs around that particular area is an appropriate location, which I'm not sure.
I suspect that's going to be picked up in condition. I'm not sure that you necessarily have anything associated with that tunnels because of the depth of it, but hedgehogs will be in and around with the ecological enhancement process as well. So, Jeanette.
I mean, I think the ha will act as an ecological corridor, so there will be lots of things that will move along the ditch. So it's a positive move rather than a barrier.
Super good. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm just very briefly going back to the 106. So, and before we move to comments, closing statements, your comments. I did spot we talked about earlier on in the conversation about the price of the grass courts, and we talked about the membership strategy, and just conscious also of the price of the ticket, the price of use in the Merton section of the park. Now, notwithstanding the extra cost of maintaining grass courts, I wondered if the applicant would be willing to engage into a condition, into an agreement in heads of terms where there would be, we would review a form of parity, but taking into consideration the fact that grass courts are more expensive to maintain.
Yes, I think we can agree to that.
Thank you very much. Just defer to Emily.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable and something we can put in quite easily.
Amazing. So that's an addition to, that's number 2, tweaked. So thank you. We will recite this when we go after comments. So thank you very much. We've gone through a hell of a lot tonight. Obviously going through some of the legal arguments, we've gone through very, very detailed. So we have explored these issues very thoroughly, and we've also explored the conditions and the heads of terms very thoroughly as well. I'm now obviously drawing attention to comments, closing statements, anyone that we've not covered, not questions, just comments and statements. So who would like to go first? Take these 2 at a time. Susie.
Okay, can I say first of all that there are lots and lots of things about this application that actually I like. I like the deculverting. I like the idea of voles and reptiles using the lake. I like supporting the veteran trees. I like the idea that in the long term, this is beneficial for bats. There are lots of improvements to the heads of terms and the conditions which have strengthened them, which I'm really pleased about. But if you step back, you're still looking at an enormous court. Sure, it's surrounded by oak trees, but they will drop their leaves in the winter and it'll be visible for miles. The scale is huge. The 38 courts and the amount of concrete used, even though it's been reduced, is enormous. I'm not happy about the carbon position. The fact remains that we don't have any calculations apart from Dr. Dawson's on the consequences of the trees being cut and the loss of sequestration while the new ones grow. All we have is vaguely expressed optimism, which I don't really think is an answer. And the other thing is, it hasn't been explored today, but we explored it outside. It's just a matter of law. Everywhere it says that Section 106 allows conditions to be made which run with the land and they can be made in perpetuity. And of course, that's true. But what's also true is that if there is another planning application in 10 or 20 years, those conditions under Section 106 can be set aside. So, and the other thing is that we have, in one of the answers in the mod sheet, I asked about the fact that the park, because it has been degraded already, whether that made it more or less significant that it was going to be degraded more. And the answer is that because it has already been eroded, the significance of the park, that makes further harm less significant. And that means that if we agree this, and everyone concedes that it's going to cause harm to the metropolitan open land, the only question is whether it's substantial harm or less than substantial harm, but it is harm. If we agree to this and the park is further degraded, which it will be by a massive court and 38 tennis courts, then if the All England decide to come back in the future, it will be harder to say no, because the land will have been further degraded. And that's probably not a relevant consideration. But what I would say is that I think we should step back. I am not convinced that this is less than substantial harm, and I'm not convinced that the contribution outweighs, clearly outweighs, the harm which this will induce. And what I would say, I've been thinking about this, I didn't know it was Earl Spencer who had got asked Capability Brown to build this, but in a way it's slightly symmetrical. The reason we still have Wimbledon Common is because the residents of Wimbledon back at the beginning of the 19th century said no to Earl Spencer. And I'm afraid, I think in this case, we are being asked to agree to too much, too big, too harmful to a piece of metropolitan open land, and I will be voting against. And that's not an easy decision.
Thank you, Susie. Please, anyone else? Comments? Want to say anything? Tom?
Yeah, I think going all the way back to the start of the meeting, really, obviously, there's a lot of things as members we're being asked to balance. See the sporting and recreation use. Obviously, asked questions about that earlier. So still remain unconvinced that what we are looking at is sporting. I appreciate the recreation side, but I don't think you can separate, as Councillor Hicks has said, the fact that a lot of the benefits seem to come from the parks and the sort of park and everything else, and sort of there seems to be very few benefits to anyone other than the All England of the 38 courts on the show court. I think the public and private access, the idea of the 9.4 hectare park is very compelling, but then as we sort of got out of answers earlier, the fact that the majority of the land is still just as private as it was before, if not more, arguably, because you could be a member of a golf club or you could go on a pay-per-play basis. So actually, there's an argument there that even less of it is public than was before. I think for those reasons, for me, the sort of I can't see that the special circumstances of such a level of harm that Councillor Hicks has already mentioned. And going back to the sort of one of the first things Callum said, we can only consider this application. There isn't a sort of third option. There isn't a sort of alternative. there was a lot of opportunity, I think, for the applicant to look at alternatives, and I think there could have been substantially more engagement before we got to this point with the local community to think what those alternatives might be, and we might not have had however many thousands of people signing petitions and responding to the consultations, and the substantial number that are obviously sitting in the gallery and watching online. So I think on that basis, it seems to me that this is an obvious case of overdevelopment. I think, no one has sat here. I don't think anyone has made the point that they don't think something could be looked at as some form of development. I don't think anyone sat here and said they're anti-tennis or anti the All England or anything else. But I think, this does look like a stretch, and I think we can only, as I say, we can only reject the application because there is no option to ask for changes. So on that basis, I'll be voting against.
Thank you. Colleagues, so Billy.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long night and there's a lot to consider. But my mind keeps coming back to what it means for Wimbledon. That Wimbledon is operating, the LTEC, is operating on a world stage. This is a world, we talk about it being a British institution. It's actually a world institution. I mean, I'm not a great tennis fan, but I know it means something in terms of global reach or global brand, as we sometimes talk about now. Yes, there are difficulties and there are concerns, but what does it mean for jobs? What does it mean? I mean, this is a big organization. It didn't have to become a living wage employer, but it is. And one of the first, I think. And also, it confirmed tonight that it will be a living wage site, and also with their employers. And I think, I recognize the concerns of the people who live in the area. But the thing that strikes me is the debate tonight is a very British debate, in the sense of lots of detail, grinding detail, if you don't mind me saying, not unimportant, and people's questions that were asked are not unimportant by any means, but an inordinate amount of detail. But there's no big picture. The big picture is that this organization is operating on a world stage. We are now the London Borough, the borough of sport. And it would be a tragedy as we expand the reach of our sport nationally and internationally that we rejected this application. So I'll be voting for this application tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. That is uncalled for. If I can spot it, I will ask you to leave. Stuart, please.
Thanks, Chair. And well, I think to echo some of the things that Susie and Tom both mentioned, there are definitely things that could be improved by this application. But I think the core thing for me comes down to the very special circumstances that allowed this application to even come to this panel in the first place. And for me, I think this is a game-changing application. I think game-changing for the tournament, for the borough. I think the economic, the environmental opportunities are huge. And I think the planners at Merton have done a fantastic job working with Altec to get this application into the position that it is. So I'm very happy to support this application.
Thank you, Dan.
I've been sitting here and I spent days and days reading this application, and I've been processing everything I've been hearing from residents with sincere and deeply held concerns. And I can't help but feel there's a little bit of a disconnect between what I hear people tell me and what I am reading in this report. And I get the impression that there's been a lot of misinformation, a lot of misunderstanding happening around what is being proposed. And I think it is being fanned by some people who should know better. Some people are leading others up the garden path, no pun intended, when it comes to what this planning application does. If we look at the facts, if we look at what is in here right now, we can see if this application is rejected, the public will have zero access to land. If it is supported, we'll have 9.4 hectares of publicly accessible parkland. If we do nothing and reject this, we'll see the natural environment deteriorate. Without securing investment, we'll see the benefits to the environment go away. What we can have instead is 1,500 new trees, not just planted, looked after. If they die, they'll get replaced. I get the impression that the applicant here is approaching this with the best of intentions. They are a not-for-profit organization trying to do the good thing. 1,000 tickets a year to local school kids. Biodiversity net gain. Normally, when you look at these kind of applications, they're in single figures. We've got triple figures here, double figures. You're enhancing public toilet facilities in Wimbledon Park. You can bring swimming potentially back to a desalted lake. Why are we turning this down? Why are people seriously telling others this is a bad application when what you can, yes, we are building on open land, but the term is misleading. It's open land for you to look at, not for you to walk on. If you actually want to walk on this land, you need to support this application. If you want to be looking at green fields, you can turn this down. If you want to be playing on green courts, then you should support this application. So to my mind, I think that this balance has been met. And I think the simple choice here is to enhance the facilities for the residents in our borough and to protect our planet and to bring Wimbledon Championships back home, create a sense of pride, £28 million. For me, it's a simple choice. I'll be supporting this application.
Thank you very much, Dan, for that very passionate speech. Michael.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very aware of the time, so I'm going to keep it quite short. I've listened to all the arguments carefully, and I think all of my colleagues on the panel make excellent points this evening. I come down on balance marginally that because of jobs, because of benefits to the local economy, and to secure Wimbledon tennis for future generations, marginally, I'm in favour of this application.
Thank you. Sherry-Ann?
Again, aware of the late night that we're all facing here. I would also like to say that, just in my closing remarks, that the committee has done an incredible amount of work, research, an incredible amount of site visits, of technical briefings led by officers, led by Alltech. We've listened to the objectors. We've attended sort of an inordinate amount of meetings about this application, and we're quite well informed. And in terms of the policy reasons to say, I mean, I just think our officers are recommending approval. They're saying that the substantial public benefits of the proposal outweigh any harm to the metropolitan open land and the on-site heritage assets. And I think that's something that we need to take into consideration, as well as all the things we heard this evening, that our officers are recommending this for approval. So I will be voting in favour of the application.
Thank you. Ed?
Thank you. I think Councillor Hicks started her conclusion with how much she liked in this application. I feel much the same. There's a large amount of this I like. There are a few things that I don't, that I've mentioned before. I think the disruption to a lot of the local residents is one thing, and a lot of it is mitigated. My main concern is the building on metropolitan open land. I think it's just a little bit too big, the scheme. There's a lot of pluses. It's not quite there, and as we can't adjust it, I'm afraid I won't be supporting it this evening.
Thank you. Kirsten, do you want to say anything?
I won't be too long. I was in between because I am for change, but I am in the built environment, so I can see the benefits and the quality of the design. But the impact on the metropolitan land and some of the greenwashing, yeah, I won't be supporting the application.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I'll again, late hour, a lot to sum up, but I think for me, I definitely, you know, what I would sum this up to be as an interesting application that builds on some of the heritage of a very well-known and very influential landscape designer, and I would even call probably civil engineer, who shaped landscape on behalf of clients rather than persist with the natural world. And we've already heard that the reality is the rating of historic land doesn't put an onus on the applicant to do anything, whereas this application does something. And I think Dan's point has a lot of merits about if you would want to walk on the site, you would need a path to do that. I welcome everyone's energies, passions, time into this as we move to the vote. So I'll be calling a vote on the order paper. So it's what's read, in addition to the following changes to the 106 agreement. So I'm just going to run through them. So that's an amendment to the wording of number 15 to include councillors and also a review of the terms of reference on an annual basis and timings. So that's number 16, the inclusion of a hotline for residents. That's number 26, the creation, or not, sorry, it's a new 106. It's 29 then. It's the creation of an arts and culture strategy delivered with funds up to £52,000. We've heard number 28. It's an amendment to the more parity with Wandsworth, so it's and half. So effectively that matches that. And that a new one we've heard is a tweak to number 2, which is the community access tennis courts to be comparable cost based on the reality that maintaining grass courts is a lot more than concrete courts. I would also like to add in there a statement, which I will be taking for all my future planning committee decisions, because it's sure can do. I've been advised to double check. Is there anything else you want to add to that 106? Heads of terms, no? Or conditions? No? Cool. Good point. All right, so basically, so while making our discussions, committee members need to have regard to officers' recommendation contained within the committee report and the modifications and heads of terms and conditions that will be secured, and the information that has been helpfully provided by the applicant during the course of their meeting is useful as background to the obligations and the scheme. However, anything that is not to be specifically secured should not be taken into condition by members. Cool. Super. Fantastic. Okay, so can we have a vote on all that? I'll be calling those voting against.
For, Chair.
Not voting.
None, Chair.
Voting for.
6, Chair.
Thank you very much. The application is passed. So we will. No, you can't. Please leave the room. Please leave the room. Please leave the room. Please, security, please. We will adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much. The committee, please.